When you make a mistake, you have two choices: admit defeat and apologize, or shift the blame onto anything else but yourself. And during those intense and stressful times, a mask of sort falls as you see the business for who they are, whether they cared about you, the consumer, or themselves, money essentially. A good example of this is Elizabeth Holmes. She once held the empire in her hand with a company called Theranos, with the intent to revolutionize healthcare. This became her whole persona, a persona of showing everyone that she really cared, showing during her interviews and her TED Talk she was invited to. And at one point, she was even touted to be the next Steve Jobs. So essentially, what went wrong? And how was she able to keep such a massive secret hidden for so long? Well, contracts. While simple, NDA agreements were abused to threaten those who knew about Theranos' shady dealings. And while this was happening behind closed doors, Theranos was evaluated at nearly $1 billion. And of course, no business reaches that evaluation without some form of stable income. And if it wasn't the Edison machine, then there was only one way she could have gained that amount of money to run a fraudulent business. And that was the investors. She abused the investors' trust at the expense of financial gain for herself and the company, going on as far to claim that all the tests were done through the Edison machine, when in reality that wasn't the case. They were all done via traditional blood test methods. Her main line was, "All you need is a drop of blood." A drop of blood enough to return back an in-depth analysis. And from my initial perspective, this seemed basically impossible. But her effectiveness to lie was so convincing that she had nearly the entire world believing she was the next and upcoming Steve Jobs. And I truly believe that she planted that seed in everyone's mind. She wore the iconic turtleneck, sporting a mature and masculine demeanor to assert dominance, paired with her unique deep voice. And that was later on seen to be fake. And I don't know how I can show you, so you can have a listen for yourself. And it's quite eerie, the changes in her voice and the way she upholds herself in a way.
It turned out he had a nub on his elbow, and we... Sure, yeah, over the last 11 years, we've
So then, how did it all go down? Simple. It was a whistleblower. He saw through Holmes' lies and did his own investigation, concluding that it was all fake. The Edison machine never worked in the first place. And after all this information was out, everyone switched up on her in an instant, betrayed by her blatant lies and the hope that was bared from a fruitless tree. And as the uproar continued, Holmes had to face consequences for her actions, as she faced up to 11 years in prison, in of which she did, as she was finally put behind bars in 2023. Oh, that was quite depressing, but I might actually have someone who could cheer up the mood, add a bit of spice to the world. Over to you.
Ever heard of the Apple Newton? Well, probably not, and for good reason. In the early 90s, Apple was really struggling with a lot of low-effort, inexpensive products due to the original company leadership, namely Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, being gone. In this period, Apple made a lot of products that were just absolute flops. One of these was the Apple Newton. The Apple Newton was a PDA, or personal digital assistant, that was very early in the PDA genre of tech and just tried to do a lot of things that it actually couldn't. If you don't know what a PDA is, it is not personal displays of affection. It is basically a little assistant that conducts notes and little business tasks that's kind of like a phone, but isn't. Like a lot of Apple products at the time, it was really innovative and cool, but also really expensive, and it didn't really work half the time. While it did introduce a lot of cool features, namely its handwriting feature, it just didn't really do well at these features, and with its expensive price tag, people just didn't buy it. If you want to go see more about Apple's products in this time, then you should go check out my Storm Tech video on how Bill Gates saved Apple.
Imagine getting a new phone, an Android to be specific. You love it with all your heart, tending to its needs, making sure the phone is satisfied. And what do you get in return? An explosive. This commonly happened when the phone was on charge, causing a short circuit within the battery, leading to thermal runaway. Now pair that with the watertight enclosure of the phone and you have yourself a shrapnel bomb. Another factor that contributed to this issue was the rushed production of the phones, as Samsung wanted to meet the demand as fast as possible. As you know, if you choose quantity over quality, the quality is going to suffer. and quality did suffer, which then left them with major defects. And that is exactly what happened. Due to this, Samsung had their phones completely banned from boarding planes due to the risk of fire and burns if the phone exploded, and naturally this triggered a massive recall that cost Samsung billions, as they made all the necessary adjustments to prevent this from happening again, as they released their phones claiming the issue was fixed. And you know what happened? They started exploding again, causing another mass recall of their phones. It's one thing to get it wrong, but it's another thing to claim that you fixed the issue and the risk is still there. However, unlike Theranos, their mistake was genuine and they apologized, which caused Samsung to begin the grueling task of re-earning everyone's trust. After all, people were scared to buy a phone from Samsung out of fear that it could just blow up on them. Because at the end of the day, I'm not spending nearly $1,000 only to have it blow up in my face.
In the late 90s, Microsoft's business was absolutely booming. Riding off the heels of two major operating systems, Microsoft was ready to make another huge hit. Little did they know that this was foreshadowing just a little bit. Introducing Windows Me, or Millennium Edition. Not only did this release of Windows restrict a lot of the features that people had come to love in Windows 98 and 95, namely MS-DOS, but it also has come to be known as the least stable version of Windows ever made. It was extremely prone to bugs and just crashing outright. In response, Microsoft made a Windows 98 Second Edition, which added a lot of the features that Windows Me did add to Windows 98. That way, no one had to suffer through Windows Me. Yay. Microsoft followed Windows Me and Windows 2000 up with Windows XP, one of the most successful Windows operating systems of all time. Because of course they did. Okay, this next one isn't entirely a flop, but I still wanted to touch on it. In the mid-2010s, Apple announced a new product category. This time, Apple announced the Apple Watch. While not necessarily a commercial failure, actually they did sell rather well, I think Apple did just an absolute terrible job with the launch of this product. Not only did they completely confuse the naming scheme when calling the successor to the Apple Watch the Apple Watch Series 1, I don't think I need to explain the problem there, but they also only supported this watch model for 4 years, after which they dropped OS support for it, which for an Apple Watch is just incredibly short. No other Apple Watch has received that little OS support. The first generation Apple Watch was severely neglected, and out of pretty much all the Apple products that has been made in the last 20 years, I'd say the Apple Watch received some of the worst support. Now, the Apple Watch did become extremely successful, but that was in no part due to the launch of the Apple Watch. Oh, and also, I daily an original Apple Watch. And if you want to show some PDA, why don't you hit that like and subscribe button? Thanks, sweetie. Oh, hey, and speaking of me, you should go subscribe to me. Not me, Lorenzo, but never mind. Go subscribe.